So in Richfield on this house, they had several different piping materials, everything from galvanized steel to newer products like PEX. And we had all sorts of things happening, both with the water lines, our water supply, as well as our drainage. Several different problems, everything from different materials mixing that are creating problems that cause corrosion, to improperly sloped drainage piping, which was going to be causing clogs really frequently. So I've been working with At Your Service Pros and Healthy Water and Air for the last 6 years. One of the things that I like about this company is our intentions behind all of our work. We're not just in it to make a quick buck like a lot of contractors in the valley. We're actually intending on making better products, installing them at a higher quality, and doing things correctly by the book.
Everything by the book.
And so what we did is we first had to start ripping out all of our materials. So that included taking out the cast iron vent stack for the drainage system. That included having to rip out the main water line that was leaking and was leaking lead into our water supply. And then once we ripped everything out, then we had to put everything back in an updated material list. So we started with replacing our water main from the city supply into the home. We did this with CTS polyethylene piping as the new current standard for the material being used. And a common good practice to do is run a copper wire along it so that in the future, if anybody needs to trace it and find it, then they can easily. And we run this through the yard on the side of the home, and we want it to be 3 feet below grade, which is the top of our soil level. And that's to prevent frost and freezing of the water pipe. Now, once we ran it through there, then we ran it underneath the foundation, being sure to seal it, and then we had it penetrating into the crawl space. Now, we used that material for about a foot or so once it came into the crawl space, and then we converted it to PEX, 1-inch type B PEX material. And as we ran it through the home, then we always have to keep in mind where we're running it and any obstacles that may be in the way that'll cause that material to get cut into, that'll cause it to overheat or get too cold. Those are all things that we have to keep in mind. We have to keep in mind when we put down the subflooring. We had to make sure that we were running that PEX material far enough away from where the nails would go into the flooring, just in case any of those nails happened to be too close to that PEX and pierce or puncture it. So these are all things that as we're roughing a home, then we have to be really careful of and be aware of. And so we ran that piping along the floor joists, stapling it and anchoring it every 3 feet. And then we ran it into our mechanical room where we can have things like our water shutoff, our pressure reducing valve for the home accessible, both for maintenance as well as for Jared. In case something happens, he needs to be able to quickly turn off the water, because getting into that crawl space isn't exactly the easiest thing, nor is it the fastest thing, especially when you have water leaking.
I found it! I found it!
And then after that, we run our hot and cold lines to each location that we're going to be having our appliances and fixtures coming into. And during that rough-in period, we want our PEX coming up out of the floor at least a foot. It's always preferable a little bit more because things like vanities need to be placed, and so that piping material needs to be coming up through that vanity now. And we don't put a stop or a water shutoff right there immediately. We do that later on in the project And so we have to just cap it so that we can do a pressure test on the system. And while we run all these pipes through the house, teeing off for each appliance or fixture, then we have to be sure that the hot and cold lines aren't touching, because if they touch, then that'll actually create the ability for heat transfer from that hot water line to the cold water line, making the hot water not as hot, making the cold water too warm. So these are all things we have to be aware of as we run it. And then on the drainage system, we replaced what was cast iron, and it was bits and pieces of newer ABS as repairs in the past were done, ironically done incorrectly. They weren't having correct slope, so as water goes down our drain, it needs to have enough velocity to move through the piping and carry any solids that you're bringing down the drain. When it's sloped the wrong way, water is able to get there slowly, and it doesn't carry all of our solids, which is then creating your clogs. So we had to replace all of that cast iron and ABS that was in there with ABS, making sure that it was sloped consistently the entire time, making sure that it was anchored the entire time, so as it settles and rests over the years, then it can't start to mess with that slope. And once we've replaced all that drainage piping, then we have to do a pressure test on our water supply, just pumping it up with an air compressor, and then we have to do a water test on the drainage system. And how we go about that is we plug the city outlet where we're going into the city drainage system, and we pour water from the stack, which is where we get up on the roof, and we pour water into it using a garden hose. We fill it up, and then we have to leave that water in there for about 24 hours to ensure we have no leaks in the piping. Once we've done all of that, then we can go ahead and start placing all of our fixtures and appliances. And so if you're doing a project like this yourself, say you're finishing your basement or something, all of these little details are really what is going to make or break the life of your plumbing system. Things like properly sloping your drainage system, like I mentioned earlier. Things like strapping up all of your water supply piping and having them separated so that they're not able to get punctured by things. Having things like strike plates so that nails can't go into piping. All these small things are going to be the thing that will make or break your plumbing system having a problem every year or lasting 100 years without any problems. So that is it.